$8,500 is a lot of money. It stings that it just got wasted.
Where to go, what to do.
Yeah, and guess what? This family is not alone. More than 100 families paid this funeral home for services in advance. Over $700,000 in all, nearly gone. Tonight, KSL investigator Brittany Glass uncovers a state investigation into this buried betrayal.
Nyman Funeral Home was only in business about 5 years. During that time, the Utah Attorney General says owners father and son Kent and Lonnie Nyman mishandled pre-need funeral service funds. The men now face a combined 8 felony charges that leave the victims fearing the worst.
Matthew, Kathy, oh, the whole bunch.
Margaret Phillips has lived a lot of life.
Lots of stories there.
And the 91-year-old's not going anywhere anytime soon.
More stories in the making.
But this one's certainly not a happy story.
They just wanted to meet you so that they would know who the Nymans took advantage of.
Margaret knew and trusted Kent Nyman, so she didn't think twice when he encouraged her to set up and sign a prepaid funeral contract with his funeral home.
He just came up to me and said, you need to invest.
Taking care of the financial burden of her funeral so her family won't have to. In May 2016, she wrote a check for $8,485 directly to Nyman Funeral Home.
Yeah, this was their operating account here, and it shows her amount being deposited in there.
It wasn't until funeral director Lonnie Nyman was in the news for arranging to have sex with a minor that Margaret told her family about the contract.
And wanted to make sure that it was okay. Then it ended up being a pre-needs trust.
Margaret's son-in-law, Gary Knighton, has since taken over as her power of attorney. Margaret is one of 111 clients who may not get the funerals they paid for.
The money was supposed to have been placed in trust.
Andrew Solberg is the lead detective in the Logan Police Department's investigation into the funeral home.
And what we found is that it wasn't.
According to the Utah Attorney General, whose office is handling prosecution in this case, in just over 4 years, Nyman Funeral Home collected more than $772,000 for pre-need funeral plans.
As the number rose, basically what it came down to was that I knew that this was going to be a big case.
Charging documents show none of the funds were placed in trust accounts as required by law. Instead, the money was deposited altogether into the company's operating account.
No, Sam's Club was 146, the shoes are
Knighton says that money soon became the Nymans' cash cow.
There's so many things that are not business related.
The KSL investigators obtained financial statements showing the Nymans were spending money from that account on everything from sporting goods to shoes, fast food, and yeah, Willow's is miniature golf. The account all but wiped out with less than $1,000 remaining, according to the AG.
My job at the time was to find the money. I spent a year trying to find the money to confirm where it was.
With no success.
For them to have violated that trust, it truly is unconscionable.
Kurt Sof owns 2 funeral homes of his own. The business has been in his family since 1915.
Pretty hard decision.
The longtime funeral director sits on the state's Funeral Service Board, which oversees funeral regulations across Utah.
They were licensed as a funeral service establishment. There was a licensed funeral service practitioner, and there was a licensed pre-need sales agent. And yet they did not follow the rules.
The Division of Occupational and Professional Licensing issues licenses, but doesn't do much to follow up. Which begs the question, where's the state oversight?
That's a good question. No, Doppel has the right to audit.
In the case of the Nymans, Doppel didn't take action until after Lonnie's arrest in October 2018. Kent Nyman's license to sell pre-need plans was surrendered that December, and the following September, so was the funeral home's license. In the midst of all that, last April, the funeral home filed for bankruptcy.
Are they going to get what they paid for?
A very frustrating thing about working fraud is that a lot of times the money's gone.
I would think that, unfortunately, that the families are going to be far down the creditor list before they would be made whole.
And although Lonnie Nyman remains in prison on those unrelated charges, his father's at home, and he's not talking.
Hi, Kent. Brittany Glass with the KSL TV investigators. How are you?
Good.
Good.
I don't have anything to say or anything.
Knighton says the state needs to do more to protect consumers.
But I would think the state would have some system set up to audit these things. They signed up for a trust that was supposed to be dedicated money that couldn't be touched.
As for
Margaret's an optimistic person, so she'll get through it. It's got a good view of the mountains, huh?
but the question remains whether she and more than 100 other customers will get the funerals they paid for.
In this case, 100 victims were over the age of 65 when they signed up with the Nymans. Although Lonnie wanted to speak with me on camera, the Utah Department of Corrections would not allow a camera inside the Gunnison facility. Over the phone, he did tell me he's never denied anyone a funeral or a refund if they requested one. Now, as for Kent, he still has an active life insurance license, although he's not allowed to use it to sell those pre-needs funeral contracts like he could before. The Nymans were selling prepaid funeral plans two ways, funding them either through trusts or insurance. Investigators say any money they collected through insurance is likely safe.
Brittany, what are the biggest recommendations so that we can avoid this kind of thing?
Well, there are quite a few. First off, go with someone. An extra set of eyes, ears can mean everything when you're making decisions like these. And of course, ask questions. It is your money, so find out how it's being used, how it's being invested, and where it is. That's your right. And know who you're dealing with. How long has the funeral home been in business? What's their history and reputation? Those are all questions that come to mind.
All good questions. Thank you, Brittany.
Of course.
There are a lot more resources online right now under the Investigates tab on KSLTV.com. The KSL investigators started looking into this issue after a tip from one of our viewers. If you've experienced something you think just isn't right, the KSL investigators want to help. Visit KSLinvestigates.com to submit your tip so we can get working for you.